everyone. I'm JJ Dixon, and I am here this afternoon with a very special individual. They call her the mother of a particular program, and we'll get into that in a minute. But let me introduce you to Sherri Shaw Luke.
Yes, hi. Nice to be here.
Sherri Shaw Luke, a former police officer with the Sheriff's Office here in Jacksonville, Florida. Tell us who you are first before we get into the program.
I am Sherri Shaw Luke. I'm a former police officer. I am the wife of Master Sergeant in the Marine Corps, Luke, and I'm the mother of 3.
And you were actually in the Marine Corps yourself at one point, weren't you?
I was, directly out of high school.
All right. So you were a tough lady, especially back then. So the program that I'm referencing is called Shoot Baskets, Not Brothers. But before we get to the program, let me find out a little bit about your upbringing, because I know that you ended up going into the Marine Corps after you graduated, and you ended up becoming a police officer. But prior to that, how was your life growing up? Because you grew up here in Jacksonville, right?
I grew up in Jacksonville. I actually grew up on the north side. I came out of Magnolia Gardens and then moved to the Cleveland Road area. And my father then was the state attorney in charge of capital crimes here in Florida, and he worked with the Urban League and National Council of Negro Women. We worked with that organization with Gertrude Peel and several organizations here. He ended up being moving up to Chief Justice of the Florida State Supreme Court.
Wow. And what was your father's name?
Leander Jerry Shaw.
Leander Jerry Shaw. Wow. Junior. What an awesome lineage you have. So
I was very blessed.
You kind of had to be successful.
I did. I was very, very blessed. I can remember when I told my parents I wanted to go in the military, and they were just shocked. And my dad was like, okay. And he actually told this to one of the reporters. A reporter came out to do an interview, and he says, oh, they're going to send Sherri right back. He said, that's my girly girl. He says, she doesn't do sports. She doesn't do, but I wanted to do, I did no sports. I was very, very much a girly girl, but I wanted to do something to show that I could do something different. I was always the one that they said, oh, we had a pool in our backyard. We were one of the few homes on the north side that had a pool, and I didn't swim. I don't know how to ride a bike. I never rode a bicycle. Things like that were, kids usually do. I wasn't interested in. I was a huge reader. So that was pretty much my life. So when I went to private school, so it's, that was a little different. I was a little sheltered.
Were you the baby of the family?
I was the oldest girl. I have one older brother that's deceased now, but I had an older brother. And but they ended up electing after 6th or 8th grade to go to public school. Mm-hmm. So we had a choice, and I can remember saying, "Oh, I wanted to go to Northwestern," which I ended up being an SRO at, which is so ironic. But I wanted to go to Northwestern, and my sister got to go. And I can remember my parents say, "No, Sherri, I think you need to stay where you are." So it was a little different. So joining the police department to me, after getting out of the Marine Corps, I was approached by 2 officers. I just was out running one day. And I kept saying, oh, I like that job. And it happened to be within a month of me thinking about it. Wow. 2 officers came up and they were like, well, why are you running? And I said, well, just run. I just got out of the Marine Corps and, just running. And he told me about a recruitment program. And he said the sheriff's office was really looking for people, and they were having a lot of trouble back then with people passing the agility, the background, and the academics. Yeah. So they were trying to find people that were well-rounded. And I said, okay. So I took the test and passed the test and became an officer. And that was very interesting, very interesting.
And were your parents shocked?
Yes, very much so, very much so. My mother actually followed me on patrol for a while when I first started. Followed me. My husband followed me. And I felt so bad for my training officer, because he's like, your husband follows us on every call, and your mother was actually out here. And I had to ask my mom, did you actually have a scanner? And I don't want you to get hurt. And I took her on ride-alongs to show her what police work was like. And I can remember telling one of the suspects, you don't talk to my daughter like that. And I'm like, Mom, I'm just going to leave you in the car from now on. It was a good experience. I liked it. I liked patrol, but my intent always was I wanted to work with the public. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to do proactive policing. That was my huge thing. Community involvement, get the community involved, try to change the broken window syndrome. We had a lot of that where I grew up, so I wanted to change that. So I went into the detective division first. Okay. And Joanne and I became the first 2 female African American officers in DICE. So we did that, and then I left Vice, and I was accepted into community affairs, which was a blessing. And from there, my career was able to grow. And then I left the sheriff's office, became a special agent with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and specialized in working with children.
So when you were in community affairs, you ended up becoming a school resource officer.
Yeah, we didn't have a school resource officer program when I went to community affairs. So the department was trying to institute the program. So they asked me, would you like to be, an SRO? That seems like, your niche. Would you like to do that? Because I was always working with Pace Center for Girls and doing talks and that type of thing. So I was able to be, and I'm really proud of that I was the first SRO that the sheriff's office ever had.
Wow, so you were the very first SRO.
I was the very first SRO. Wow. I actually started the SRO program.
Did they have a format for the program?
They did.
An outline or?
They did. The program was successful in other parts of Florida.
Okay.
So I went to Northwestern, then Anthony Rogers came on, and then he went to Reigns.
Okay.
So we had two of us that we did that for a while, and then they actually started the actual program. It was like a pilot program with us.
Was that funded through the sheriff's office?
No, at first we were not. Anthony and I were not funded through the sheriff's office. All the other SROs were funded through the sheriff's office. We were the only two because we were funded under that grant. So we were not funded through the sheriff's office when the program started.
Out with the grant, and then I guess after they saw the success of the program,
then they picked it up, and it came in. I think it went in almost every school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right now, it's in every. Well, a lot of it has to do with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act now too, but it's in every school at this point. Every school has to have an officer.
And we taught. We actually taught classes. We did peer pressure, drug awareness. We taught classes. We had scheduled times. We were in the history classes. We were in civics classes. We were even in English classes. I mean, we spent a lot of time with the students.
And the students actually got a chance to see you as more than just a police officer.
Oh, definitely.
Really?
Definitely.
How many of us in here can accept that there are some things that they cannot do better than others?
On any given day, you might find Officer Jerry Thomas teaching in a Jacksonville classroom. But instead of science or math, the coursework for this class here at Martin Luther King Elementary School is decidedly different.
Will asked his dad for some money to buy a part for his bike. His dad quickly reminds him that he didn't rake the leaves or put out the trash. What is that going to do for his self-esteem? Lord. He says, Lord. How many people think it's on Lord?
Today, the lesson is about self-esteem. Tomorrow, it may be about drug awareness, coping with peer pressure, or how to look for a job. A veteran police officer, Thomas has touched the lives of many inner-city children. First, through programs such as Drug Abuse Resistance Education, or DARE, and later as one of the founders of a new program called Shoot Baskets, Not Brothers, designed to help stop gang violence.
That was, and we wanted that because we wanted community buy-in for the program, because a lot of times when you see an officer coming, it's adversarial.
Right.
So it's like, oh, they're putting officers only in our school. These are the only two schools. Why are there our schools? What is happening? Are they going to be arresting our kids? What is it about? And it actually was a community proactive program. And we worked a lot with Show Die and Show Cap. I don't know if you remember Show Die and Show Cap.
I do.
And we worked a lot with that. So with that pie of working with HUD, police, and the sheriff's office, and guidance counselors, and everyone having a piece of that pie, we were able to make the recipe work.
Right. And this is kind of a common theme with some of the other officers that I spoke to about programs back then, is that this was the original community policing concept.
Oh, definitely.
Before it was named community policing, you all were already doing that kind of stuff.
I think we spent more time after school with our kids than we actually did. I mean, because we had structured things we did during the day with the kids, but the kids wanted more. They wanted programs where, come in and teach me Dress for Success. We did a Dress for Success where we had the owners of different businesses come in, teach the kids how to fill out resumes, and then actually hire them and give them a job.
Wow.
And that was not to the sheriff's office. It was just something we did after school. And I can remember they owned a Burger King, Crystal, some of the different places. And these were kids that really could not even fill out the application at first.
So even though you all were police officers who were being, quote unquote, paid either through a grant or through the sheriff's office to work in these schools and with these students, you still chose to spend your own time in your off hours doing things for the students.
This was my community. I lived in the community. Okay. So that was, these are these are my children. Mm-hmm. These are the kids that are going to grow up and be my community. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was really important. I had 2 small sons at the time, and it was just something that I think it was a calling. Yeah. It really was a calling.
And I wanted to ask you this also. Did you talk about the community? So you had all these other different resources and organizations that were involved. Did you all collaborate? Did you have meetings about the kids? How did that part of it?
Yes, we would have show die, show cap are both programs, which is serious habitual offender, drug involved, serious habitual offender cap. I think it was a comprehensive action program. And what we do is we identify kids, even as officers, guidance counselors, whoever identifies them, and we put them in like a little pie. And we meet about the child. What are their needs? This child, I remember being at James Water Johnson and Eugene Butler. This child doesn't have a free lunch, doesn't eat breakfast or lunch. He's hungry. He's acting out because mom can't read to fill out the application. How do we fix this? This child does not have clothes. He's picked on in school. How do we fix this? I'll always be grateful to Steinmark. Come here so much, and what's with the belts? And they were curious, and then they were like, "Oh, here, take these. Just take them." So you were
going to Steinmark and purchasing things that the kids needed.
Yes, I was very lucky.
I wanted to get around to asking you in terms of the need that you saw that the kids had. At some point, you realized that it was going to take more than just being the SRO in the school during the 8-hour day, right?
Yes.
And so that must have led you to this program that I'm looking at on this shirt that you're wearing called Shoot Baskets.
Shoot Baskets, Not Brothers. Yes.
Shoot Baskets, Not Brothers. So tell us how you went from just being the SRO assigned to the school to all this great. And by the way, I have spoken with a couple of the male officers that worked with you later on in the program after you kind of set it up, and they referred to you as the mother of the program. So tell us how that became.
It started with at James Water Johnson. It started there, and we had kids. And when I say these kids were in my office for gun offenses, these kids were in the office for drug offenses, different things. But when you talk to them, it's almost like, well, I don't even know why we fight. You don't know why you fight? Well, the guys from 27th Street, the guys from Flag Street, and there was always something going on. So I started working with them after school, saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit down and talk. We're going to talk. No guns, no knives, no fighting, nothing. Everyone agreed. And we started meeting after school. Well, I started doing tutoring programs because some of these kids, it was time for them. They were either going to age out of 6th grade.
Right. Wow.
It was a 6th grade center then. So you're going to age out of 6th grade or you're going to drop out. I didn't want them dropping out. I didn't want them aging out. I wanted these kids to be able to complete something. So we started doing tutoring, and I would do tutoring after school. Then it was, well, can we talk to you about this? Do you know that there's a fight going on? Well, several times kids came to me and said, there's going to be a shooting after school. There's going to be a gang fight after school. The sheriff's office told me we don't have gangs. Sherri, we don't have gangs. You don't write a report saying we have gangs. I mean, that's basically their mentality back then, that we have youth groups. No, we have gangs. I know. I'm sorry. We do have gangs. So once we'd established that they were, no one really knew what the ultimate fights were. There was, well, my brother used to fight with their brothers. Then my dad used to fight with their dad. It was that far back. And it was just where you were from. There were territorial lines, but everyone was the same.
Right.
I ended up having a daughter. I had a baby.
Okay.
And when I had this baby, when I say these kids got so protective, it literally was, if 27th Street was going to go to the little bus that dropped her off after school, she was a little newborn, and they would bring her to the school after she was like 6, 8 weeks old, and drop her off, and then I would go home. And or my husband might pick her up if we had something after school. But we always, you know, I would let her come to the campus. Who would actually carry the carrier to my office? Well, 27th Street did it yesterday, so then it was Flag Street, and that became a competition. Well, what did you do today? Tell me something you did today positive. Okay, well then you can pick up the baby.
Right.
And to see these kids, and of course my supervisor's like, okay, Sherri, are you crazy?
Yes, right.
You know, what is going on with you that you are after school with these kids? I've heard you out in the middle of the night answering calls or showing up at scenes. What is going on with you and these kids? So they became very concerned, and it was.
Wait a minute. So you were even out at night on your own time when you were off,
constantly,
trying to make sure that these kids stayed out of trouble.
Constantly, because I was always getting paged. I would get a page. The worst page I ever got was when Jeff got killed. And it was just a page, and it was just screaming on the, you know, I called back and they're screaming on the phone, and the payphone, it went payphone went dead, and it's just a big mess. Finally found the child sitting on the sidewalk, just boo-hoo-hooing. And he's like, you know, Officer Smith, they killed Jeff. That was the saddest thing, because I work with him every day.
Yeah.
And it was just, so this you have
real.
to go. Yeah, it was very real. And the sheriff's office back then, they were like, okay, you know, and I've heard people say, okay, Sherri, that's a lollipop cop. You know, she is really, and I've heard the phrase, I used to be offended by it. I used to be offended. I was like, the lollipop cop, what do you mean by that? I worked fights, I'm a Marine, you know, I worked patrol, you know, but I did have a softer side. The kids needed a softer side, but those kids also needed what my supervisor was aware of. Sherri, it's great for you to be out here with them, but we can't have you out here in the middle of the night with these kids. And I would tell him, I said, well, you know, I call Officer Thomas sometimes, because I would call Jerry Thomas and say, Jerry, you know, and he would have to drive all the way from the south side. And he was like, Sherri, it's 2:30 in the morning. Really? Jerry, can you please come? I don't want, you know, Chief, you know, getting upset. I could say I had somebody with me. And he would come out. And then he started coming after school. And he started, you know, saying, I'll come over. And he was a DARE officer. And he and the kids, they took to him. They took to him. Then Kim Lockley started coming and saying, hey, I'll do some academic programs. And these officers aren't getting paid. They're showing up because the sheriff's office is saying, we cannot have you out there. You know, you're off duty. You know, we know you're in your patrol car because you're calling in and out. And, you know, what's going on? What was going on? There was a need. That need, there was a chasm with the programs that was going on between danger, stranger drugs, where this SRO, and that wasn't being met. Somebody had to meet that. So that's how it started with working with the actual gangs. And
so you had developed such a rapport and relationship with these kids who were not your average kids until they basically trusted you. They trusted you, and obviously you trusted them.
I did. I always had, you know, I always know I was a police officer. You're a policeman first, Sherri. You know, this is your job, you know. But when I got off duty, it was different. I felt more like a mother. You know, I had to, it was more, I have to protect them. What can I do to make it better for my child?
Right.
And that's what would happen. But it would cause friction sometimes with my job, because I can give you an incident where there was a gun on campus. And one of the children was like, hey, there's a gun on campus. I need the gun. I need the gun. Well, are you going to be in your office for a while? Yes, I'm going to be in my office. Okay. Then later on, I get a note. The gun is in the backseat of your patrol car.
Wow.
Of course, the sheriff's office is flipping out. You know, what is going on here, Sherri? Is the gun off campus?
But you got the gun.
Is the gun off campus? Do the kids know that they can come to me? That's what we need.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it should have been handled that way, but that's the way it was handled. And that was my mentality back then. So I had a different mentality where even some of the male officers would come over and say, Sherri, wait a minute. You know, we're getting ready to do, you know, body checks. We're getting ready, you know, where they would, you know, pat downs before they're coming into school, that type of thing. Because the kids, they were worried. We had a task force that actually came in that was worried about things. So it was, but we had the Chief Henrys, the Joe Stelmas, the, you know, Lieutenant Hills. We had people that were behind me and would say
what you were doing.
They did. They would actually say, you know, Sherri, we're going to try to get a program together. Just be patient. We're, and so I'd written for what we call a Form 4, interdepartment correspondence, asking for a youth intervention program so that I can get officers that can, come over and work with us that weren't just SROs or just their officers, that were actually community policing officers is what we needed. And it took a couple of years. But during that time, I was blessed enough that fellow officers were like, I would come. So when they came, and at first there was friction with that. I was like, oh no, you're playing basketball, you bumped him in the chin, and now, and they were like, Sherri, we got this. We're okay, we got this.
So let's pause for a second. So you had been doing your thing at the school. You had been meeting with them after school, having them sit down and try to communicate with one another verbally.
Yes.
You have been doing homework programs and
job programs, Dress for Success programs.
And now looks like we're going to another dimension with this.
Yes, it did.
So now we have introduced male officers to what you were doing.
Yes.
Oh boy.
And of course they brought in a different, but it was needed. I can look back and see how much it was needed. They didn't have a lot of male figures in their life. Some of these kids did not have male figures, and they needed that. So where one of the kids would come over and just, I remember going across Matthews Bridge. I thought we were going out of the city and out of the state, just flipping out in the back of the car. And, well, where are we going? I said, I told you I want to take you to the beach. I want you to see the beach. I can remember clearing out of Chuck E. Cheese. We showed up at Chuck E. Cheese with the kids, just me and a bunch of kids. And it was quite a few. When I say every person in Chuck grabbed their little kids and they're running out, and I was like, wow, but the kids enjoyed it. They never had a party at Chuck E. Cheese. So we had a community birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese for 14, 15-year-old sixth graders. But they needed those things. But the male officers came in and said, Sherri, we're not doing birthday parties. We're not sitting here and, drawing pictures on why this person is mad and that person is mad.
Men didn't want to do that.
They didn't want to do that, but they started playing ball with them after school. There were several officers that would come over. I mean, several officers. I can remember Greg Spicer, Willie Perry, Jerry Thomas, Kim Lockley. They would just show up and they would play ball with them. And while they would play ball, they would interact. So there were no uniforms because we didn't want to get in trouble with the sheriff's office. So we were like, okay, you got to take your uniform off, after school. But so they, like I said, they would just show up after they left their schools, and it worked out beautifully because the kids started to see that male officers who used to be adversarial to them were somebody they could talk to. And they would talk to the male officers sometimes about some things that they might not talk to me about. So you need that balance. You really needed that balance. And for 2 years, there wasn't that balance. There was always, I never saw them cry in front of the male officers, but I would see them boo-hoo with me. Literally just fall out crying. I would not be tough. And I can remember my chief actually telling me, I don't want them sitting that close up under you. Why do they sit so close to you? It was eerie sometimes that they would, I'm kind of boxed in, and I'm like, okay, so you're trying to turn your gun this way, and you're kind of boxed in, and you're wondering. After a while, I didn't have that. That wasn't there. The eeriness wasn't there.
Some old articles, and there were a ton of old articles that were done on the program. And I remember in one of the pictures, there was a young man. You were probably sitting like on the edge of a stage, and there was a young man that was sitting, right down from you, and you had your hand on his chin, kind of like this. And that picture struck me because I saw you as the officer that you were because you had your uniform on, but I saw more of like a motherly figure to that young man, and whatever conversation you all were having, you were giving it and he was receiving it.
That child was very special to me. I ended up spending a lot of time with that particular child and his parents. I mean, a lot of time with that particular child. He wanted to get out of school. He wanted to do better, and he's very honest, and he says, but sometimes I steal. Okay, well, what do you steal? Mostly food. That struck me. He didn't say I steal things to play with. Mostly food. Well, why do you steal food? He looked at me like, are you crazy to eat? Do you not understand this? So that particular child taught me a lot because because of the way I grew up, I'd never, and I can honestly say I never knew anybody who was hungry. Not only did I never see it, these kids were hungry. And when he says, or I get in trouble because I act out in the classroom. Why do you act out in the classroom? I don't understand anything she's saying.
Oh, wow.
But there was a teacher there, Pam Grant. I think she passed away, but she took kids aside and she would tutor them, and we would just do programs. So it worked out where several of those kids were very special, and I would spend a lot of taking to my home. They were around my children. They were around my newborn, my boys. I had very small boys. And it was an experience that I will never forget. It was, as my son calls it, my legacy. And that made me feel so good. My son is like, Mommy, that is your legacy. Is Shoot Baskets Not Brothers. That was something we grew up with, something. And then I was so proud to find out the program went so long with so many. I never knew.
It did.
I never knew that it went.
We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. But before we get to that, I did want to say that, and I do wholeheartedly agree with you that kids have to have that balance between, you know, the nurturing mother and then that male manly figure, especially young boys. They have to have that balance. And I love that the program brought that. There was another article that I saw, and there was a picture of a young girl in there, and the caption was, and I think this was a quote from the young girl, the caption was something like, "She doesn't yell at us, she listens," something to that effect. And so, again, that just speaks to who you were, not only as an officer, but as a person. You know, so many times we don't listen to these kids. To listen to somebody saying they steal and not go, "You shouldn't be stealing," but to actually listen to understand. And then you took the initiative. You even went so far as to make change because you found out what he was doing wrong, why he was doing it wrong, and what could you do to help make it better.
And that was one of the main reasons. God gives us assignments. I truly believe God gives us assignments. And while we're here, you know, we need to do our assignment. That was my assignment. My assignment was to make sure these kids are nurtured, make sure they're, you know, law-abiding, grow up to be law-abiding citizens. And we had some very good success stories. We had some that were large success stories. But then my success stories might be smaller. It might be, oh, I got him out of 12th grade. You know, it was the first time in the family out of high school, much less trying to go to college. You know, he hasn't had an arrest in 4 years, or and that was one thing that the kids actually mentioned to me. You know, we don't fight anymore. That made me feel really good to hear one of the kids say, "We don't fight anymore. You know, you're always going to be here." And I was just like, oh, I wish I could stay here forever, you know, but I was really proud that the officers, you know, kept it going, and that the sheriff's office ended up sponsoring the program and making it a real program.
The program actually started by our school resource officers on their own time, doing some extra work and after hours getting together and being concerned about a couple of rival gangs that were beginning to take out their frustrations on one another. And they got them together and got them to playing basketball against each other and taking their frustrations out on the basketball court. But then went further than that, began to teach them how to go for a job interview and actually go out and look for jobs for the kids and to talk about their future and which direction their life was taking.
And so I haven't shared this with anyone, but I had already spoken with Officer Perry and Officer Thomas about their part in Shoot Baskets Not Brothers. But after I reached out to you and we spoke, I started looking for some of the kids. And I have actually located two of the young men. One of them is still local. The other one lives in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm going to be speaking more with them. But they were so excited over the phone, I couldn't get them to stop talking about the program. They're both married, and they both shared with me that they have spoken to their wives about the program.
Oh, it gives me chills. Wow.
Shared with me that, and I don't know if they're from the same area or not because I haven't physically met with them yet, but they shared with me that the program, because what I asked them was, do you think that programs like that work? And they both said, absolutely. They said that program taught them how to get along with their enemies and that they were able to make friends with the guys from the other side.
Commonality.
They weren't. They were able to make friends with them. They ended up going skating together. They ended up playing sports together throughout their years as they went on. And they graduated from high school. They ended up playing sports together. And they give so much credit to the program?
A lot of those were the male officers.
These boys are in their 40s.
Those were those male, that part of the program were those male officers that came over, because when they came, we had already started working together, doing things together, but once it became a structured program through the sheriff's office and they gave us tons more, more officers, they started taking them places.
Right.
That commonality, because the school board wasn't, acknowledging we should not be placing this kid from this area in the same school with this kid from this area. I'm so sorry. From this area. You don't mix, and those are things we had to look at, that the sheriff's office had to look at. What borders do you have? Are you aware that there's tension between this group and that group? It could be directly across the street. What is the tension? How can we alleviate that tension? What do they have in common? Basketball was in common. Going on trips. These were trips, these kids, like, to you to go to St. Augustine would be nothing. For them to go to St. Augustine is a trip of a lifetime. So they were small things. And we didn't always do it by the book, and I admit that. We get cars and put them in cars and drive them around. And
what's his name? John Lewis.
Yes.
What did John Lewis say?
He was
good trouble.
That's it, good trouble.
Get in good trouble.
Good trouble.
And that's all right.
Good. And it was good trouble.
That's all right.
Because it brought us together, and it helped me become a better person. That program really showed me a side of life. Even going in the Marine Corps, I was in the air wings. I wasn't, it wasn't like I was out there jumping out of planes, digging foxholes. I was, and it's, and it's a very elite thing, to be a female Marine. It's, they're, like the
especially
smallest of
then.
Yes, I'd never seen a female Marine before that ever.
Wow.
Ever. But but even through the Marine Corps, family life, these kids brought something to me that showed me where their needs are. I'm working with programs right now. I just had someone come over yesterday to pick up. I just buy clearance. I just stay on the clearance and buy clearance, and I'm give to the Cancer Society. Wow. It showed me that there's a need out there. And when you're blessed, you have to bless others. Be it through programs, be it through individuality, and the support of several of the members of the command staff with the sheriff's office, I think helped that program a lot. Because without their support, it would have never become a structured program. Once it became structured, you brought in more officers and more female officers. So there wasn't so much pressure on me to always have to be there, because if I couldn't be there, I was nervous. If I'm listening to the scanner and I hear an arrest and it's, and I know the name. I'm jumping in the car, wait a minute, what's going on here? Can you tell me what's going on? And I've had to arrest them. I've had to make arrests, but I'm fortunate enough, they would literally come to my office. I know there's pickup order on me. Yeah, there is. But it wasn't adversarial. It was not adversarial.
But that is very special. I don't think people realize how special it is that you have such a relationship with someone that they know they have to go to be incarcerated, and they want to do it through you because they know that you care. You know what I mean? That's truly special.
Thank you.
Truly special. And yes, the program grew. I was an SRO from 2000 to 2010. And almost every summer I was privileged to work with the Summer Youth Intervention Program with the girls. So they continued on with the boys, and then they also incorporated the girls. And I think at last count, it was up to somewhere like 200 kids in the summertime that would come. They would be referred by their SROs, or they could be court ordered by the courts to attend the program. And it became huge, and the success remained huge. So it is truly your legacy. And while I know some that worked with the program, and oh my God, there were a lot of officers that worked with that program. I'll venture to say probably 40 or 50 officers in the end.
Wow.
But they may not know the legacy of the program, but those of us that do, we really recognize and appreciate the hard work that you and Officer Thomas and Perry and Spicer and some of the others put into just getting Shoot Baskets Not Brothers off the ground so it could springboard into the SYIP Summer Youth Intervention Program that was able to help boys and girls?
Yeah, I never got the opportunity to work with the girls, but I did have a girls group that I worked with after school. I actually got like a temporary custody type thing of one of the girls. But we had things like Aaliyah's Jewelry. Aaliyah's Jewelry would, say, hey, what do y'all need? And they would do things. So before it became sponsored, we had community buy-in. So that was really good. We had buy-in from the, HUD. From HUD. We had buy-in from guidance counselors. We had some buy-in from coaches. A lot of the coaches were like, well, I don't have time for them to go to this after school, then I need them here. And I'm like, well, look, they're not going to be in that program if they're not alive to be in that program. Right. So the first hour, I need them with me. And the kids would, and like I said, these were rough and tumble kids, but the love, the just to be hugged so hard, you feel like, okay, let up, let up, or to watch.
But some of them, that was probably the only hug they got.
Exactly. And they needed it. And I can remember some of the male officers just really upset about that. Sherri, don't let them hug you. Don't let them hug you. And I was like, well, what's the thing with the hugs? And it was like, no, we're trying to turn them into men, Sherri. You've got them this far. Let us take them further and turn them into men.
And how hard was that for you to do?
Very hard. Very hard. I can remember times coming home and saying, I'm through. I'm through. They let them watch this TV show, or they let them watch this video, and I would get upset. And I was like, why did you let them watch that? That is a gang-related video. Boys on the Hood, or boys in the Hood. Yes, that was a huge one.
Oh, my goodness.
I have my little videotape box because I had people who would actually donate. Things, they heard about it through the newspaper, or their child went to school. Peer pressure, drug awareness, self-esteem, dangerous, just so many videos. So I'm out there with my, peer pressure, videos, and we're doing different scenarios on how to react to different things, because you're going to be approached by the police if you live in certain areas. We have to be realistic. We, especially as minorities, we're more likely to be approached by the police. I need to know how to interact with the police. I need you to know when you're driving, if you know what's good at you, keep your hands at the 10 and 2. There were little things I had to teach you that your mom can't teach you. Right. The sheriff's office isn't going to come in and teach you. I can remember, like I said, that particular movie, that got me so bad. And the male officers were like, we had a meeting. We had a huge meeting about it. This includes the chief, the lieutenant, and, it's a huge thing. And they're like, Sherri, what is the issue? And I said, why are you showing them something that I feel is glorified gangs? And he said, Sherri, what we're trying to do is show them, how are you different? We need you to be different. Where my mentality was, I don't need to show you something negative to tell you to be positive. I need you to be positive through the programs we're doing. Later on, the kids were like, we were okay with the movie. We've already seen that movie.
Again, and that's what I was going to say. They're going to see it whether we.
That's what they said. That's what they said.
They're going to see it. They probably had already seen it, but they need that balance. And being that they were going to see it anyway, they needed to hear it from the perspective of their mentors and the police that were trying to steer them down the right path. They needed that.
Yeah, so it was little things like that, or the sheriff's office is like, did you tell the kids that, if we approach them, that we can't search their car? Yes, I did. If you don't have probable cause, you can't search. Sherri, are you really out there teaching this? Yes, I am. So unless you're doing it the right way and for the right reasons, my kids are going to be educated in law enforcement. Yeah. So that was, so we had those conflicts sometimes where they would say, well, you're an officer, you're telling the kids that don't let us search their car, and they could walk off at any time, and, if you're a passenger, those type of things. And they were like, and that's what I did. And that's exactly what I did. And later on, it became a program called Law U. We started teaching the Law U, and, different programs. So there were so many different things back there with the sheriff's office that it was growing. It was a time of growth. It was a time when we had to acknowledge that we had gangs. We had to acknowledge that we had officers out there in the community that cared, that were from that community. We had the flukers. There were officers who I grew up under. The Lonnie Millers, that still lived in the community. It was, we lived within blocks of each other, growing up. So there were so many officers that wanted to do and wanted to care, black and white. And that was one of the things that I really did. And the Stelma was big into the program. Stillman's thing was let us give you the room for creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things you're doing, we don't do the Sheriff's Office Youth Ranch. But if that's what you want to do, Sherri, and you can get it through your boss, I'll sign off on it. So it's like, gee, could I take the kids to the Sheriff's Office Youth Ranch for the summer? And that to the kids, you take kids that aren't your kids. So the kids that you take don't know you.
Oh.
And then someone else takes your kids.
Oh.
And they don't know you're an officer. So you're down there with them for a couple of weeks. And they have no idea you're a policeman.
Uh-huh.
And then the last day, we put on our Oakleys and we shine. We go out the night before, shine up our, patrol cars. And Anthony Rogers and I had, because of the program, we had new cars where a lot of the officers had to have, use their cars.
Right.
So the program bought all new equipment for us. Wow. So we had the shiny cars with the new, new bars, and we would show up in our dress uniform. And then when the lights come on, all the officers are standing there, and the kids are like, that's my counselor.
Oh, they didn't know that you all were officers.
Not until the last day.
Wow.
Not until the last day. But it showed those kids, look at how much time.
Yeah.
And then another group would come for 2 weeks. Look at how much time you spent with an officer as a counselor.
Conflict.
No conflict. And we learned how to do things like takedowns. Simple things. If I have a child that's cutting up, I can bear hug a child down. Mm-hmm. And I have sat there for well over 30 minutes rocking a child. Mm-hmm. I'm rocking you to keep you from fighting, and eventually you just give it in, and they're just crying. Right. They're just crying. Officer Smith, this is what's going on. Where I've seen other officers immediately, react, and it's a grab, a handcuff. We're going to fight.
Yeah.
Why aren't they fighting me? These kids didn't fight me. I didn't have to be in that environment. And it was the same thing when I rode patrol. I lived in 109. I rode 109. Mm-hmm. So it was my community. Yeah. It was nothing for people to say, hey, so-and-so can be picked up at this time. So then you call and say, Auntie, you have so-and-so. And it was just.
But you just brought a different approach.
It was different.
You brought a different approach to it, a different perspective to it. And obviously it was needed back then.
It's still needed.
Because look what has happened because of the approach that you brought. We've learned that there are other ways to deal with the youth.
Community policing.
Yeah, exactly. We have learned, and that's long before someone decided to put a title on community policing. Mm-hmm. You had already figured it out. So in closing, if there's anything that you want to say, if it's to the children, to the officers, just in general, about your works with the program, I want you to have the opportunity to say that. So look right into the camera.
I really want to thank the officers who kept that program going. I didn't know how big it had gotten, and just to hear the stories, success stories and the stories of the officers working with the kids, it warms my heart. It really does. And it makes me think that there's a lot of good still out there in the world. I especially want to, thank the officers who spent almost 2 years off duty after school with their time before it was ever a program. They made that program a success. And I think they deserve that recognition for what they did, and I thank you. And you guys know who you are. I don't want to name names in case I miss somebody out, but you know who you are, and I really thank you a lot, because there were times when I wanted to just give up, and you were there to push. There were times when they said, Sherri, you can't do that program. You can't be out there at night, and you would show up and back me up. You would go to meetings and say, Chief, we got her. We're going to be there. And I appreciate that so much, because without your help, never would have been a program.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for all the work that you did here in the city of Jacksonville. I know you went on to live in other cities, other states, and even other countries. But you, according to what you shared with me, this is your first love. And so I just want to thank you for putting the time into our children here in our city. And because of that, they have gone out into the world, and they're doing great things. So again, thank you.
It needs to know that, African American officers in Jacksonville made a change and are still making changes. They are phenomenal.
They care.